6th meeting of the Westford School Committee. This meeting is being recorded, and if you're able, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excuse me. We'll start with the consent agenda. There's a version of meeting minutes in the packet. The warrant summary was there in the packet. A list of this year's club approvals was in the packet, sorry. And very excited to announce a positive vote and up for approval from us by the, as an employment agreement, wow. An employment agreement between the Westford School Committee and the Westford Education Association, Unit B. Any comments, questions, discussion on those items? Great. I'll look for a motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
Chris? Okay, and all those in favor? Thank you. Unanimous? Okay. We'll move on to public comment. A reminder that public comment for any item or topic on or off the agenda is always available near the top of the agenda for individuals to share their thoughts. Speakers will be limited to 2 minutes per person. Please use public comment even if you refer to something later on the agenda. Virtual public comment is available through Zoom. Raise your hand and you'll be promoted to panelist and unmuted, or in person at the microphone. We'll just give that a minute to see
I have nobody on.
anybody in the room.
It's quite nice.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We will move on to informational updates then, starting with the superintendent.
Great. So we had talked about setting up our fall building tours with Mr. Coughlin, Director of Special Education and Social Emotional Learning. And so we're going to, we narrowed that down to Wednesday afternoon, the 15th. So he's going to send out information to folks who are interested about the time and the different spaces and things and plans that they have over at WA. And that's kind of be the focus to visit all the different programs that exist over there.
Great.
SASA, which is the South Asian Student Association that we have at Westford Academy, is hosting their upcoming Darba event, which is a combination of Diwali and Garba. And they were really successful last year, and they shared that with us through the DEI team, so I wanted to share that. If one of the two of you were going to share that, I apologize in advance. But it's on the 17th, that's a Friday night before our next meeting, so I wanted to make sure we mentioned it. The marching band, I was told the marching band had a great season, different competitions that they had, and they had a fantastic showing at the NESBA Fall Finals, which took place last Sunday. And then we had 14 students from WA who were selected into the MMEA Eastern District Senior Festival, which is the music festival. So there were students from the choral program, from the orchestra program, from the band program. So 14 students were selected into the senior festival. 8 of them were also recommended to audition for All-State, which is exciting. So I just wanted to congratulate all of those students. And that's all I have.
Thank you. School committee updates.
Policy has been meeting. We're going through, I think we probably gave this update last time, going through policies, looking for, we're looking at language of all of the policies, looking for inclusive language, which in many cases looks like getting rid of things like him, her, his, she, he, things like that. And just, those are just kind of low-hanging fruit updates, but something that is important, that we get all those sort of up to standard. And then while we do that, we also are flagging policies that maybe haven't been looked at in a while or have something interesting that merit a closer look. And so we'll kind of put those, we keep a priority queue of all policies of things that we want to look at high priority near term versus, can sit for a while. And so we kind of have been going through those systematically.
So yeah, we think the first wave of
Yeah, thank you.
changes is going to hit November 20th.
Next meeting.
Next meeting.
Next meeting,
Thank you.
assuming we get all our homework done.
Yeah.
Decided to put it in writing.
Yeah, no, it's
Now
a
you're-
stake in the sand,
yeah,
which is the way to do it. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else?
The town DEI meeting met on October 25th. Again, they met in person with a hybrid option, and again, a really lovely meeting, a lot of participation. They're still working on the multicultural calendar, and I also believe Magali and Madonna Mackenzie, our liaison from the town committee, are working on a nice little movie project for the new year, which more details to come shortly. And one other thing to highlight, which it is now available on YouTube through WestfordCAT. If you search the Westford DEI Committee podcast, our very own Magali has been interviewed talking all things equity and DEI. So if anybody wants a good podcast to listen to and hear what's going on,
If,
I love it.
for example, you've got a drive coming up.
you've got a drive coming up, yeah.
Anyone else with updates?
Student Advisory Committee, Subcommittee met with STAC and with Stuco tonight. STAC, an hour on Friday. Some good discussions were had. A lot about, some of the goings-on at school right now and some of the also pressures, expectations, and some good discussion about start times, which also School Start Time Subcommittee met Friday. We got to meet a little bit with WA Principal Dan Toomey, and talk about some things. So some really good discussions happening right now and information being collected.
Thank you. Yeah, I made the comment about a drive. Several of us are planning to attend the MASC conference, joint with MASS conference down the Cape, Wednesday through Friday of this week. You should all have seen an email in your inbox from Catherine about any of the resolutions that, as delegate, that she will vote on. I also had another, October was Principal Appreciation Month, which I don't think we said out loud. I apologize. But I did maintain our tradition of a handwritten note delivered. It was a little over the deadline because I waited till the last minute and then I was sick. So they got them by Friday. But on behalf of the committee, each of our 9 principals were thanked for their valuable position in our district. So that's all I had.
It's Principal Appreciation Season, really.
Yeah. Year long.
We nailed it.
Anyone else? We're good? Okay, students.
Okay, so the Friday before Halloween was Trunk or Treat, which was a big success. We had a great turnout, both with student organizations and with people who came to Trunk or Treat.
Yeah.
So besides the running out of candy that happened, everything else went very smoothly. And then things in student council are kind of ramping up for the Holiday Bazaar, which is going to be December 2nd from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we have around 180 vendors and around 30 clubs participating this year. And there was a ton of interest from vendors. We have wait lists of another 30, 40 vendors
Wow.
that we weren't able to place. And then I know I was talking to Athletic Director Jeff Bunyan, and we had a ton of sports teams from WA make it to their state championships. Not the championships, make it into the state tournament.
Mm-hmm.
He said this was the most teams he's seen in a few years.
Wow.
You know, golf was one of them, field hockey, boys and girls soccer, cross country, volleyball. They made it pretty far, but a really good season for all WA fall sports.
Awesome.
Quarter one ended last week on November 2nd. I think sophomores take the PSAT, right? Or was it juniors who take the PSAT?
Either.
I think juniors and sophomores who took the PSAT get their results today, actually, for the PSAT scores. Picture day makeup looks like it's on the 17th. And trunk or treat was fun. I had to get my friend's brother to bring us more candy. But yeah.
Good. Thanks. Okay, we're gonna move on to a first order of business, which is the Special Education Parent Advisory Committee. So we'll welcome to the microphone Melissa Mackey and Danielle Thompson. Feel free to reintroduce yourself, though, sorry.
Thank you so much for having us. Appreciate it. Nice to see you all. November is CPAC Awareness Month, if you are not aware of that. It is the 5th annual CPAC Awareness Proclamation was signed by the Governor's Office on November 1st. And this proclamation was started by some of our own CPAC members, and it was co-written by Alicia Mallon, Kathy Healy-Norton, and Lori McCarran. And what this awareness does is it helps highlight the CPAC's valuable role as a resource to families as well as to our local and school community. So we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Who's my slide person? Thank you. So we're here tonight to just give you a brief overview of the CPAC, what we do, who we are, and some of the upcoming events that we'll have this year. So here's your CPAC board for the 23-24 school year. Myself, Melissa Mackey, is the chair. I have Danielle Thompson here with me. She's our secretary treasurer. And then Lisa Studer, who is our vice chair, was unable to be here this evening. And you see we have some, thank you, contact information. Go ahead, thank you. So we'll just briefly go over quickly what is a CPAC. Every district in the state of Massachusetts is required to establish a CPAC, and Massachusetts law assigns us both an advisory and a participatory function. So our duties include advising the school committee on matters that pertain to the education and safety of students with disabilities. And also we are tasked to meet regularly with school officials and participate in the planning, development, and evaluation of the district's special ed program. In addition, the district, as in cooperation with the CPAC, is required to conduct at least one workshop annually that is on the basic rights of students and their parents under state and federal special education laws. Next slide, thank you. So we are self-governed. We are empowered to be self-governed, which means we have created our own mission statement and we have our own bylaws or procedures that we work by. And if you are interested in reading those bylaws, they are available on our website.
Why are you laughing?
Because nobody wants to read bylaws for fun.
I have them up right
I
now.
mean, maybe somebody
Bylaws.
Just got really
I was like, why is that funny?
Okay, next slide, please. And then, so yeah, let's quickly just look at what did we do last year, so our year in review for the 22-23 school year. So the CPAC schedule of events is usually a mixture of both general meetings with membership as well as workshops and speaker event opportunities. So you see we met throughout the fall and spring of last year. In March we had that basic rights workshop that we're required to have every year. It was on the topic of understanding the IEP. We collaborate we use the Federation for Children with Special Needs in order to present this basic rights workshop every year. In March and April, we conducted and administered our annual survey of parents with special needs. And then in April, we correlated all that data, and in April, we presented that to our membership first, and then we came here and presented that in May at the school committee meeting. In May, we also had another workshop called Turning 3 Essentials, again with the Federation for Children with Special Needs. And then a few other meetings, including an advisory capacity. We worked with the advisory committee in June in the search for the new director of special education. Oh, yes, so, who's controlling this? Is this one? Okay.
No, I'm not.
No.
No, I
it's
am.
They
okay.
have. I just have it up. on
So briefly, we'll just touch a little bit on the survey that we conducted last year. We did come before you in May with it in its entirety, and so if you were interested in going back to all of that data, you can see that on our website as well as our past surveys. And then Danielle's going to speak on this part. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks again for having us. Yeah, so the surveys, we started the annual survey back in 2020, so we've run 3 annual surveys, so this year will be our 4th, and we developed it really to get a pulse on what was going on in the community with the parents of special needs community. So really it's just any family or caregiver child who has a 504 or IEP is welcome to take the survey, and we're understanding the successes and challenges. We run this in collaboration with the special education department in Westford, so that we make sure we're covering all areas. It's really important data to bring in to both the CPAC community and to the district as well. So we can go to the next slide. And so this is just really brief data, some of the highlights that came from last year's survey. There's much more data on our website, I believe, right, that hosts all of the information from the survey. But some of the top concerns that came up for families with their students were dyslexia and language-based learning disability support, appropriate accommodations, or FAPE, which is a fair and appropriate public education, lack of progress, transitioning from schools to adulthood, and social and emotional navigating peer relationships. And then we asked some of the top priorities that we think families think that we should set goals and provide resources for, and that came up with literacy and language-based support, adequate staffing, including support and training for staff within the schools, social emotional learning, including mental health, and communication and relationships between parents and the district was definitely one of our biggest goals as a CPAC this year, but it also came up as a top priority, as well as inclusion. So really from the survey, we're able to take the data and split it into advisory and make recommendations to the district, but it also guides what we do as a CPAC community as far as hosting different speakers and providing different resources to the community again. So some of the recommendations that we had brought to the school committee last year was developing office hours with the special education director, Gerard Coughlin, and he, although he's not here, I just want to kind of give a shout out. He was very eager to meet with us even before the school year had started, and mentioned that he was going to set up these office hours, and he got them in place within the first month of school, which was amazing. So any family who has any kind of questions, even regarding eligibility or just questions within special education, can sign up on the district website to meet with Gerard every Thursday. He opens 20-minute slots. So that is completed. We can check that off. Another recommendation made was to increase communication between parents and the district. And I feel we have really kind of taken on that role in many different layers. So, oh, sorry, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. One of the main recommendations was that the district put more descriptive details on the website about programming, such as, for example, like the REACH program or a Pathways program. Parents do have a lot of questions around what's available to their students. They might have specific concerns but not really know what specific services or programs are available to their students. So we were guided by some neighboring district websites that hosted a lot more detail on their website of programming. So we are working with the Office of Special Education to see if we can provide some more descriptive details on our district website for parents. And then also talking about inclusion practices, we are going to look through the lens of possibly considering looking through the equity audit. The district already has an equity audit coming up this year, so we're going to see if we can maybe look through the inclusion lens through that, and if not, we are hoping to maybe explore some other internal review processes of the inclusion practices so that we can provide some more information back to the community on that. And again, so we also guide our goals of a CPAC community to collaborate with the district regarding mental health supports for the community. We were able to do a lot of this last year and kind of seeping into this year as well. Again, this will be an ongoing goal, but we've collaborated with Nicole through the town. She's the community wellness coordinator. Lauren Clark over at Westford Academy Counseling Department has shared resources. I believe it's the Cartwheel program that they had just signed up for this year that's available. So that's in our newsletter that went out today, I believe. There's more information there. And again, we'll have ongoing communication with the special education office, and Melissa was able to also present at the Building Connections resource night at Abbott towards the end of last year, I believe. So that's an ongoing goal for us. We are trying to recruit CPAC liaisons at each school, including out-of-district communities. So I believe our last meeting, we did have several people volunteer to be a liaison between the out-of-district CPAC.
Not several.
Well, there was two. There were two. Not several. A couple.
Right.
That we'll be working to kind of bring that community back into the light. But yeah, we would love to have some active members in each school, just bring awareness to CPAC events and resources that are happening. So that information's on our website. As Melissa already talked about, the basic rights workshops, it showed that 40% of our families weren't actually aware of the basic right workshops. So that's something that, we're working on to create more awareness and get it out there maybe in more detail so parents know what's available to them. And we were able to, and I just want to thank all the schools. We were invited to 8 out of 9 of the school back to school nights. So we were able to set up tables, meet families, have a presence, had some great flyers and information to sign up for our email and website. So we're all about just trying to create awareness that we exist, and we're here for the community to provide resources. Thank you. So I'm going to hand it back to Melissa.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay, so we'll look a little bit at what we're going to be doing for this year then. The next slide. So as Danielle mentioned, prior to our first meeting in September, we were doing all of those back to school nights. Again, just want to thank the principals for their collaboration on that. That gave us a lot of really great FaceTime with parents, helped us, hand out information and just increase that parent engagement that we're looking for. We did have our first meeting in September. It was our meet and greet, and it was our really we've had a couple socials, but it was for our general meeting, our first in-person meeting in some time. And so we were able to do it hybrid here. And so thank you to the district who helped make that happen. We had a really great turnout, and so it was lovely to see so many new faces. In October, we had our first workshop, which was on executive functioning, and that was a presentation by Kristen Jacobson from Cognitive Connections. It was great. It had so much meaningful strategies. A couple of them I'm going to use for myself.
Same.
It was some good stuff. And so if you were interested in those slides or any of the handouts she had available, those are also on our website. And then in just a week, we're going to have our next meeting, and that's going to be with Mr. Chris Chu there, as well as Gerard. And this is going to be an opportunity to talk about specific topics related to special education, and as well as answer questions that attendees may have. In December, we collaborated with Magali right here. Thank you so much. She's offered to come to our meeting and talk about universal design learning and how that's is being implemented in Westford Public School, and how that can support those neurodiverse students who learn a little bit differently. In January, we're having that basic rights workshop that we talked about. It's going to be on the same topic of understanding the IEP. And again, we take that information from our survey to drive forward what we're going to bring forth for our families, because one of the questions is, what are you most interested in? And understanding that document, the individual education plan, is still top priority or top concern for parents. Okay. In February, we collaborated with Landmark College. They're coming to present about navigating the college search for those who learn differently. It talks about what to consider, questions to ask, and also the wide range of accommodations and supports that exist in post-secondary education. March, we're doing our move-up fair. This happens every other year. It's a really great resource for families when your child transitions to a new school. So we're talking those who are going into kindergarten, 3rd, 6th, or 9th grade. What does special education or what does services look like at those grades? A lot of parents have questions. So every other year, in collaboration with the Office of Special Education, we put on this Move Up Fair. Parents come, we have there are representatives of student support available at every grade level. We have the breakout sessions so parents can ask their specific questions. Great resource. It's always recommended because it happens only every other year that if your child is transitioning within the next 2 years, you go ahead and attend. Then you'll see in April our annual survey presentation. So within all of this, we are creating and administering our survey. That is all. We aim for that to be given in March. We want an end of year look, and those results is what drives forward our goals for this year. And so that's what Daniel was talking about. And so we also will present to our membership. We hopefully will be invited back here to present to you as well. And then we're at the end of the year, and you know, wham bam, we're all done, and we're at nominations and elections and our social event. And so those are what we're looking forward to for the rest of the year. On your side, these are some of the ways you can contact us. We do have a website that's filled with all kinds of information. We also have our direct email address. We are on Facebook, and then we also have our email list. Many parents do not prefer, or we heard from families on our survey that they wanted another means of communication besides social media. Our email list has grown. It has doubled since March of last year, so over 100% of growth. And so we're really happy to see that. We've got some great information coming out to families, so we encourage you to sign up for the email list. If you want to be kept in the loop and maybe you're not checking Facebook all the time. One last slide, that is questions, if you have any questions. Sorry? Oh, yes, thank you, Sean.
I know, we missed you.
We forgot to introduce you at that very first slide. Sean is
Kelly.
again our school committee liaison. He comes to all of our meetings. Thank you, Sean, for your support. We really appreciate it. So if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. And if you maybe think of something later and you'd like to email us, please feel free.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Thank you.
I just have one quick question. And I think you said this, but all the meetings, all those upcoming meetings are all designed to be hybrid, right? So you're going to be in person here, like when Gerard and I come, we're going to meet with you in here, but it's still, people are still going to have a hybrid option for those, right?
Yes.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and all the meetings are going to still be taking place here?
Yes, some of the presentations, like our executive functioning one, and I think the one from Landmark College are already scheduled as virtual, just because some of the presenters don't come in person, and the one from the Federation will definitely be virtual. So, but any general meeting, we're trying to have it, yes, here. So we have that option.
I had the same question about the Move Up Fair.
The Move Up Fair is in person, and it doesn't have a virtual option
Sure,
because it's
yeah.
usually at the Blanchard School, and
like
I don't know
small
if they've
group
had that
chats
there.
and stuff, or-
Yeah, and it
okay.
just doesn't lend itself to that kind
Sure.
of ability.
yeah.
Can I
Yes.
ask why it does, I'm sorry, I just wanted
No,
to ask a
go
follow-up
for it.
about the move up here. Can I ask why it doesn't happen every year?
I don't know. I don't. It's just how it has been, and I would expect it has to do with the number of, maybe the staff that's coming back to school in the evening, or maybe there wasn't enough of a turnout for it to be every year. It would be something you'd want to ask maybe Courtney Moran. She would know the more historical information.
I do think that historically it was set up, first of all, because it was difficult to get enough people who can come and support it. So the idea of doing it every other year, because honestly, the teachers who are coming out are volunteering to come out that evening as opposed to the other, open house nights and everything that exist. And so that was the impression that I had, was that it was like that in combination with the numbers of people that were attending. But trying to really, I think, communicate that it's for people who might be making this transition within the next 2 years, because that's kind of that becomes the trick there.
Yeah, and there's still several parents who don't even know it exists, so it's something that we just have to continuously make known and try and get the information out.
Yeah.
And they've done it for a long time. They've done it long before I ever came into the district. It just then got, interrupted as everything did.
I think transitions are such an important part,
Yep.
like especially for kids who struggle with transitions,
Yeah.
so. But I interrupted you, Sean.
No, so that's a really good point. Maybe that's worth us having a discussion about. I think we'll have Mr. Coughlin at our next meeting, right? And we'll certainly have
Yep.
Dr. Chu, so maybe we can
Talk about
have
it.
a brief discussion as to that and what the history of it is. But briefly, I just wanted to, this is my third year being on CPAC as the liaison. It's been a really positive experience for me. So thank you for having me. I think One thing that I did want to point out that I think Danielle captured is that you folks really do have an influence on our policy here, and particularly on the district's policy too. The example that you gave of Mr. Coughlin's office hours are one of them. Another one is that we're doing our building tours this year, and we're really looking at it through this SEL lens and also through a special education lens. So I think that's at least two examples of the impact that you folks have had on us. So I appreciate that of your willingness to gather data and share it with us in the way that you do. Another plug for the email list. I am a subscriber of it. I'm a fan of it. You guys have gotten very good at it over the last few years, so kudos. But we're really, as a district, we're lucky to have you as volunteers and everyone else as volunteers for CPAC. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well said. Thanks. Any other?
And it's just I think it's really nice to have you early in the year like this to set in the past, I feel like we haven't done this as consistently as we should, and we tend to get CPAC at the end of the year, and I really appreciate all the information and being able to preview what's coming up, so thank you.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed I forgot yellow.
Oh, that's right. I forgot to say that. Yellow is the color for CPAC awareness.
As you can see, we took.
We don't have any
we
yellow.
both discussed it. I'm like, I don't have anything yellow in my closet. She's like, me either. I'm like, okay, let's just go.
We have a whole month to wait.
But in this proclamation, they had the Zakin Bridge lit up in yellow. They had a
Yes.
bunch of bridges throughout Massachusetts lit up in yellow, and we're going to try and get ours here lit up in yellow for next year. It's
The
a little bit
common.
more of a process than we thought it would be.
Of course.
But so, just a way to, again, bring awareness.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
wear yellow in November.
Right.
If you have it.
When it gets dark, it's the perfect time to do it, actually. Brighten up the day.
Well, and just to echo Sean's point, I know that it can be a part-time job to volunteer for things and or full-time. And so we just really appreciate it, because I know that sometimes families like to chat first with a peer, right? So sometimes those connections can be so valuable when you're trying to figure things out. So.
Yeah, we're lucky. We have a great parent forum where parents are going and seeking information, and a lot of parents sharing their journey and
Exactly.
helping one another. And it is really important to have that community, I think.
So valuable.
I guess we forgot to mention that there is a separate special education parent forum for Westford families that is not specifically run by the CPAC. Other families host it and moderate the group, but it is also another place where families can ask questions. It's a great resource to kind of search topics and kind of see what's come up and find different resources as well. So that's on Facebook as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you all so much.
Very much.
Thank you.
Melissa, in light of Veterans Day this week, thank you for your service.
Oh, yes, a lifetime ago. Yes, I did 7 years Air Force. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right on time, 7:35, business item. We'll welcome Magali up to the microphone for the MCAS results overview. Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Sorry, guys. It's coming.
Thank you. So thank you for having me tonight to present our MCAS results from the spring of 2023. So can you go to the next slide?
Why is
Thank
this-
you.
Yeah.
So this is just a quick overview of the district and state accountability. The purpose of MCAS is to provide a structure and a support system that's coherent and that is connecting student data to accountability and how the department determines support for districts and for individual schools. It is a common assessment with common indicators assessing common practices. And we use it to diagnose challenges that are in our school system or at our school levels. And it's to help us identify the appropriate interventions that are needed. Accountability is transparency for all. I remember in 1994, we did not have MCAS. I missed that, but soon after it came about. And it was actually a kind of game changer because it provided a standard mastery per grade level, and then the assessment was criteria to show that a child or a student has mastered the grade level standards. And it ensures that alignment between federal and state laws for us. And then again, it determines for DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, how to strategically implement or push those resources out to our schools, our school districts, and our schools across the state. And it is a circular process in a sense of it's tied to the multi-tier systems of support, which is a big part of our work. So the next slide, I just took this from the department because it is a nice summary of MCAS Accountability 101. So there are 3 steps. There are 2 parts of the accountability system. There's the normative component, which is signified by a percentile. And then there's the criterion reference component, which is the percentage of how we met our marks, how close have we gotten to our marks. After that, the measure of performance for groups, schools, and districts are decided based on these 5 indicators of achievement. So kids who are meeting or exceeding the standards, student growth, which is the student growth percentile score, high school completion, English language learner proficiency, which is done in January, the access test, and then additional indicators like absenteeism or chronic absenteeism. And then those results are all quantified and then categorized to determine the level of schools or districts requiring assistance. And just for future reference, if there's no data, it's because the sample group was less than 20 students. So it's not enough to say that it's a reliable sample size. So the reporting is interesting. This is the form that's on the department. It's in a 1-page document of our categorization, our normative accountability percentile, and the criterion referenced. And this is the first time that we've had all of this since 2019, because now we have 2 years of consecutive data to determine SGP and our accountability percentiles. So, oh, that one didn't skip. We can skip that one.
Yep.
Go to slide 6, this slide, yes. So the normative side of the accountability system is judged on a percentile of 1 to 99, and it's based on those 5 indicators. It's also comparing schools that are like. So if you're a non-high school, it could be like if you're a pre-K to 8, then you're compared to pre-K to 8 schools across the district. If you're a middle school that is 5 to 8, then that you're compared to 5 or 8s. We are 6 to 8 and 9 to 12. It is also used to identify lowest performing schools across the state, and from there we can also identify lowest performing grade levels and students, so that we can be more strategic and intentional with our resources and our interventions. And then each year, the prior year's data is weighted. So the 22 data is weighted 40% towards our accountability, and the 2023 data is 60% weighted. Next year, 2023, will be weighted 40%. So you can skip this slide.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No,
I
you're
thought
fine.
you got this one. We can go to slide. I'm just trying to. I had 25 minutes, so like I was like trying to cram it. Slide 12. So yes. So slide 12 is showing you the the points that we get for each indicator. And so if there is a change for an indicator, and if we get 1 point, it's 25%. If we get 2 points, then we get 50%, meeting our targets. So a measure of 3 points, then we've met our target. So we want to get to that 75% gain. And then we're going to go to slide 16. That was for your own, like, pleasure of reading. So then they categorize our schools, again, based on those 5 factors: the accountability percentile, the criterion referenced, how many kids achieved or met expectations. The SGP is another piece of that, the graduation rate, and any other assessments like access or English language proficiency. And then again, we are trying to identify where the need is the greatest. We are fortunate here in Westford that we have a high-performing results. I'm trying to recruit my daughter to go Westford Academy, but that's a personal note. So, and if there's no data, it's because the sample size was too small, and you'll see that in some of our other slides. So if you go to slide 17, that's the categorization of schools, and you'll see our schools are going to be categorized in these categories. So meeting or exceeding, substantial progress towards our targets, or moderate or limited. And then for district level, again, they also categorize it substantial progress towards our targets, moderate progress, or limited or no progress. We are fortunate enough that we've stayed in that area. It's very intrusive when the state comes in. And then if we go to slide 19, I think, did I switch it on you? 19 or 20.
Okay.
I think I moved it on you. Sorry.
What
We
one?
can go on that one.
Which one are you looking for?
I'm looking for accountability percentiles for the Abbott. I'm sorry, I thought you guys were linked to my Google, so like if I changed anything last minute, you would get it.
No, I'm off the meeting packet.
Oh, okay.
Google Drive doc. I don't think we have an updated one.
No, I haven't,
Okay,
haven't
yeah.
received anything.
Okay.
That's okay. Well, I can talk about this one too. This is fine. So the achievement percentile here. So this is a combination of our kids who are meeting and exceeding the standards mastery, and it's again from 1 to 99%. So in grades 3 through 8 for ELA, all students, the cohort that has all of our kids aggregated, we're at 65%. And then students with disabilities, you're at 24%. In comparison to the high school side, though, you can see that there's a big jump. And then low income, we are static. So it just makes me wonder. And then for, oh, that's an old one. Yeah.
Catherine, if I share it with you right now,
Yeah.
would you be able to log on to it so you can
Yep.
see the same one? I'm sending it to you right now.
Thank you, Dr. Chu, for saving me.
So you should,
I'm a last minute Nelly when it comes to letting go of these things because I still want to like perfect
You're just emailing it to me?
just emailed it to you, so
Every
you should get
PowerPoint
it.
I've ever made, it like completely changes 5 minutes before I'm about to do it.
Okay.
Right? So
Thank you for making
I
me feel normal.
completely sympathize.
Thank you. It's hard to let it go.
There you are.
If I put
Thank you so much, Dr. Chu.
Yeah, no worries. I don't remember what slide we were on, though.
Slide 19,
this one,
which was,
yes.
And so if you go into slideshow mode, it will actually skip the slides that she was hoping to
yes,
skip.
yes, because I'm not going to make you sit through 38 slides.
Ah,
They-
what?
they-
We've got all night.
I know.
Right, yeah, he just laughed.
Sorry's gonna make those times.
Okay.
Oh, so
This is where you
but
wanted.
This is the
Okay.
nice
Okay.
news.
There we go.
So this is the first time that we have this substantial data, because now we have 2 years of consecutive MCAS. So the accountability percentile it compares all the same schools throughout the state that I said, sorts schools with the same grade spans using the criteria, meeting or exceeding, and then the cumulative criterion. So we have Abbott School that's meeting or exceeding targets. Anytime they get a percentage between 75 and 100%, they are meeting their targets. They're reaching their progress for their kids, which could be 1 to 2 years of schooling.
Sure.
And then the Blanchard, Chris Foley, and the Day and Stony Brook are making substantial progress. They're at the 50 to 74 percentile in the state, which is great. They're moving right along. And then we have Westford Academy again, who is meeting or exceeding their targets at 75 to 100%, which are all wonderful things to celebrate. Westford Academy, they're performing better than 92% of other schools in the state. So that's something to really celebrate. And it is a tribute to the work of the backs of the teachers in the lower grades. So we just want to recognize them. On slide 20. So what I did here is I took all of the DART districts that we are compared to. The DART is District Analysis and Review Tools. And so I averaged all of the DART districts that we're compared to for the low income percentages, students with disabilities and ELLs, and then meeting or exceeding expectations, which is the criterion reference side of it, for grades 3 to 8, grade 10, and then I just did grade 10 for science. And then you have the SGPs over there. But if you look at our average DART compared to Westford, we have some definite achievements to celebrate. For grade 3 to 8 in math, Westford is at 71% compared to our DART districts. In grade 10, we are higher in ELA and math by a few percentage points in ELA. And then grade 10 science, we are at 85%. So that says a lot about the science curriculum that's coming up. And then our SGPs, we're in the moderate growth range, so we're in the year's growth. So anything in, I believe, in the 40 to 50, 59.
40 to 60, right? Or yeah, to 59.
59, yeah. You're right. 40 to 59% is moderate growth, which is at least a year's growth within the 9 months of schooling. And so we're on the right track for that. And if you have questions along the way, please ask them. Yes, this is the one. So again, we have our ELA. We just talked about that one in the older one. But the students with disabilities in grades 3 through 8 is 24%. At the high school, they're at 54%. So there's something happening there that makes me wonder. Like,
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
that? How do you define students with disabilities?
Students that are on IEPs, and I believe 504s.
Sometimes we see that when kids go to the high school, they're no longer on IEPs. So I wonder if the cohort side is the same.
That's a great question. I know at the high school, it's a 10th grade, like it's really a 10th grade high school exam, but it's really based on 8th grade standards. So the high school, the MCAS at the lower grades are really rigorous because they're at that grade level standard. By the time they get to 10th grade, it's 8th grade, 9th grade standards for their content. But that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
The cohort size is the same.
Right.
Yeah. And then low income, we're static. I have to say though, in looking at the panorama data, in contrast to this, like our kids are in favorable percentages for having a sense of belonging. So that's encouraging as well. The next slide is student growth percentile for ELA. And again, this is where you see the SGP. which is that typical year's growth is between the moderate growth of 40 to 59. And so we're in the moderate growth. It's something to celebrate. I think it's something to celebrate that we're in the moderate growth percentile for students with disabilities, and even our students with low income. So we are moving them, which is something to acknowledge as well. And then achievement percentiles for exceeding and meeting math. You have the 3 to 8 there, all the 3 to 8 students, students with disabilities and low income. So again, the high school, there's a difference there between 82%, 37, 48. So we have some movement. Something's happening there. We want to know what it is. What do we want to keep doing?
I'm curious though also about low income here, because I know that with school choice, we don't do school choice for the high school, right? Like we have kiddos who.
We don't have new spots.
New school choice, right.
Yeah, but we have students at the high school who are school choice.
School choice, but
They joined us earlier.
Right.
Yeah. And I think those are good questions that we can look into. These are the percentages in the data that Magali's pulling from DESE. So it's not we're not determining that. But I
Right.
think your questions are good to ask, okay, well, are those cohorts the same size? What has changed and things like that.
Because it starts out with what Magali was saying earlier, just that, like, depending on the size, you can extrapolate different things.
That's right.
As the cohort gets smaller, it's hard to say
Right.
things with certainty, and so I think just because maybe you all don't have the raw data, it's hard to gauge. You're just getting kind of the results without. I don't know if the raw data is available on the website or not, but anyway, this is nerd stuff.
Well, I think like this big picture stuff is good to have, but then when you get to the nitty gritty and drill down to the standard domains and the item analysis, and you're really looking at the standard, that's where you get a lot of momentum in having an immediate implication for the classroom practice. So this is very global.
Just looking at those elementary percentages, could there be something in those numbers that isn't necessarily content related, but that's more accessibility related, whether it be how the test is given or taken and also language accessibility? I just don't know. It just seems so significant, right, to see that discrepancy.
That's based on the outcome, right? So that's based on the overall results.
Right.
So it absolutely could have different impacts on it. And it's saying, again, when you, and I think we'll look at it later, I'm not sure, I can't remember Magali, but when we look at the number of students who are not meeting the standard, right, versus who are partially meeting and exceeding, that's when we also get a better idea of, okay, well, wait a second, how are people making progress, right, versus people who aren't meeting the standard in the first place. And that's then, as we look at those numbers, and are those numbers moving in which direction? And it also helps when we look at it to say, okay, well, how is it compared to then other districts as well too? Because it sometimes, again, the cohorts can be different, but it's also, if you're comparing them to each other, that also is not an accurate representation either. So
Right.
it's the questions that come out of the data that's the most important part.
Yeah. Thanks. And then we have the SGP for math. Again, we're in the typical year's growth, so we owe that at minimum to our students and families in our community. For low income for the high school, the cohort was not big enough, so there was no data there. That's why that one is missing.
That's less than 20, you said?
Yeah, it was less than 20.
And so that was one of the things we looked at, and that could simply mean one or two students changed between the ELA test and the math test, right? They could have left, or could have actually even potentially even in a year just not accessed a test that year, right?
Is that a determination we make just by who fills out those forms for lunch and everything?
No.
It's out of our hands?
It's a combination of self-reported, but then again, the information that DESE is collecting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have the achievement percentile for the science, technology, and engineering, which is given at grade 5 and 8. And all students in grade 5 are faring pretty well. And then grade 8 is at 62%. And then the students with disabilities are performing well or better than our 8th grade students. So that's a question that we will ask our coordinators, what's happening there? What can we do, or were there changes? And then slide 26, this is just a close, yeah, that's correct. This is just a closer look at our, the criteria of meeting or exceeding, and this is where Dr. Chu was alluding to the partially meeting expectations and not meeting. It's interesting in looking at these numbers, especially 22 to 23, is like the numbers of kids that are moving from partially meeting up to meeting, or kids who are moving from not meeting up to partially meeting. And so at grade 10, we had an 8% increase in exceeding expectations. And then the meeting expectations and partially meeting, we are consistent.
One of the things, and if you said this, I apologize, but
That's
I'm not sure
okay.
if we've talked about it even last year. That 2021 year is also just in because one of the things you had said earlier is that we now have 2 years of data, because 2021, we took the tests, but they didn't take all of the sessions. They, instead of doing 2 days, they did 1 day. So 2019 was like the last typical year, if you will. 2020 shut down, and then 2021, they were like, hey, we need to take this test again. And they're like, but let's not interrupt as much. So they didn't take the full tests, right? They took a sample of it, if you will. And then 2022, it went back to the full test, which is why then they're saying, that's why this year they're finally bringing back the accountability piece. Yep.
Yeah, because I think we were held harmless for like 2 years.
right.
Yes.
Can I ask a question? It's
Sure.
somewhat related. So, when you sit, you must sit the MCAS in 10th grade in order to graduate from the high school. Looking at these numbers, then, if you're partially meeting expectations or not meeting expectations in the MCAS as an individual student, is that a failure to graduate, or
The only one that's a failure is not meeting.
not meeting
So partially meeting expectations is still a passing.
is still a
It's still
passing grade.
still passing based on the. Now there might be, depending on the score with partially meeting, there are specific specific plans that might need to be developed, academic plans for students to say, okay, are they taking a certain class? Because then that'll be connected with it, but that doesn't prohibit a student from graduating. Not meeting the expectations, they have to keep taking the test.
They can keep taking.
And that's something that does happen. So in 10th grade, for example, well, the majority of our 9th graders take the science test, but that's because of our sequence of tests. They're all statewide, they're all considered 10th grade tests. And so the ELA and the math test that's taken in 10th grade, if a student didn't meet expectations, then they would be able to take it again their junior year, and then they would have to take it again their senior year if they still hadn't passed.
I think are there retakes now in November? I think
And
they're
I
doing
believe there's
retakes.
2 retake
Yes.
periods per year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
November and then March to May.
Right.
So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So you have a few more opportunities,
opportunities.
at least in that 9 to 12 window.
Yeah.
Also for students with disabilities extended up till 22,
Right.
if need be.
Right.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
And didn't the cutoffs change
They did.
recently? Yeah, but does it take a year to go into effect or something? Is it this year?
This year.
This year, okay. They talked about it last spring, but it was for
Yeah.
this spring,
Yeah, that's
okay.
So be prepared
So
for that.
that means, and that
Yeah,
cutoff,
so
what
next
you're
year's
talking
gonna
about
be-
is
yeah.
where is that line of partially meeting?
Right.
Where's that line of
Which
meeting?
is higher now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. The goalpost has changed.
Goalposts have moved. That's right.
They just love doing that to us.
So for science, technology, engineering, grade 10, our exceeding meeting, we're consistent, and you can see this throughout the other grade levels, that we have remained pretty consistent. There was a 4% increase in partially meeting from 2022 to 2023. So we're just wondering who those kids are, but we can get to that nitty-gritty at the school levels, which they do. And then we have ELA and math for grade 8. Our noticings are there. 8% increase in exceeding expectations. There's an 8% decrease in meeting. Our partially meeting is consistent, and then our not meeting increased by 3%. For math grade 8, we had a 2% decrease. I think that's pretty still consistent. 3% decrease in meeting exceeding, and there was a 6% increase in partially meeting.
Magali, does it hold much weight if you compare 2019 to 2023? So I know you're saying, you know, when you compare to 2022 versus 2023,
Yeah.
but is there also value to looking at the 2019 data to just kind of give us an indication
Yes.
on that was the last kind of solid
I mean,
data?
this is the first time I've seen like the 4 years
Yeah.
posted this way,
Yeah.
and it's because of that COVID gap of no administration and then
Yeah.
held harmless for 2 years.
Yeah.
So,
Because if you look at the exceeding expectations on ELA there at the top, in 2019 we were at 28%, and even though we've obviously taken a dip, we've actually come within 2 points of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
so
feel
it's-
like the 2023 test was like showing how we've recovered.
Yeah.
And then 2024 is going to show us,
Where we're
okay,
at
are
now.
we meeting the new
Yeah.
rigor of what that cutoff is?
Yeah.
It's such like a
There's-
nuanced
There's
data
a-
set.
There's a
though,
few
right?
variables too, like
Because-
Yeah.
well,
legacy tests and then
Yep.
computer-based
They changed.
testing.
Yes.
Those
Well,
those
not
parameters have
just that,
changed.
Yep.
Yeah.
too, but like if you just look across, right, like partially meeting expectations for grade 8 math, you're like, oh, we went from 18 to 25, but you actually don't necessarily want to grow that group, right? So you're like, where did those people,
Yeah.
like
That's right.
where did those kids come from?
That's one of the things we talk
Yeah,
about.
got
When
it.
you look at an
Yes.
increase in one area and a decrease,
Yeah.
and
Yes,
sometimes
okay.
sometimes that's what you're looking for, and
Right.
other times it's not.
Yes,
And
okay.
and again, that whole idea of when you're just looking at the number like this as a percentage, it again just asks other questions.
Right.
Yeah.
When you actually look at individual students, then you can see, well, actually, honestly, these 3 students last year would have been meeting expectations, but
Okay.
you can look exactly at their score and see that the cutoff has changed. And so then you go, okay, that's good to know, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
that could be a factor, or it could be a completely different,
Group of
you know,
kids. Oh.
and well, that's the other piece, is that they are all different kids.
Right,
So we're using this as a district to
Yeah.
kind of get a sense in the aggregate as to, are we on the right track?
Right,
But every single class is different.
right.
Can I ask another question, Macaulay? So is there
course.
gonna be a slide about the MCAS alternative that some kids are encouraged to take, or is that data in another subset?
That access is within the special education department, and so the alts, the special education teachers take
That's
really
such a
full control.
different process that we
It's-
haven't included it
It,
in this, but that's a good question.
Because it's obviously a cohort that's not included in this larger
absolutely.
cohort.
They don't report it to us in the
they
same
report
way.
it straight to the state.
Right, and then to individual students as their portfolio is being reviewed, because it's all a portfolio review.
Right.
So they-
But so then, so we just want to make sure, I think,
Yeah.
in future, so the next time you come back, if that data's in another spot, we want to make sure it's
Yeah.
included in this presentation as well. as
I'm
part of
sure
the broader
Sejal can help
conversation.
me with that. Because she does that at the high school. So this one right here, we highlighted the partially meeting. There was a 12% increase in the grade 8 science and technology. But again, the shift in rigor changed with the next generation MCAS. And then again, 2021, they only did 1 session. So
Can you speak to that a little bit? I know Bill sort of said that too. What year was there was a shift in the test?
I believe it was 2021.
Okay.
And
And it's
twen-
is it just science and tech, or is it all
Well,
my
we
M-
switched-
It was before 2021, but I don't remember what year it was because
My
it was a
MCAS
gradual
coordinator has
change.
class years and standards and like the moving goalposts.
Yeah.
It's,
And they changed one test, but they didn't change other tests, and so it was a
Okay.
question of then, but that's a good, we should
Okay, wow.
be able to articulate
They don't
that.
make this any easier on
No.
us.
No.
It'd take like a graduate class just in analyzing this.
I've learned a lot over the years, believe me. And then we have grade 7, our noticings for ELA and for math. You can see that we are consistent, so I feel like, 2023 was like, oh, we've recovered from all of that loss. We're back on track. Kids and teachers are really starting to pump the engines.
Oh, sorry.
Tell me again?
I'm in the thick of it.
I know. Believe me.
This is 6th grade.
You get into Edwin Analytics and it's like an abyss. You get lost. There's so much data, and it's interesting. So for grade 6, again, for our ELA and math MCAS, in spite of all the changes in the years and then our new curriculum, I know that our 6th graders haven't reached it, but our incoming this next year, our 5th graders going into 6th will have that new EL curriculum for comprehension. So I'm eager to see those results next year and see how that implementation went. But there was a 3% increase in our exceeding expectations, and then a 5% decrease in meeting expectations. So that tells me somewhere the meeting expectation, there was like 1 or 2 kids that went up to exceeding, and then some went down to partially meeting when you see those increases and decreases.
and I would think too that based on the age of these kiddos, they're not as seasoned test takers as maybe some of our older kids, right? Grade 8, grade 10. So, some of that COVID disruption too,
Yeah, they missed-
they missed some of those
In 3rd
years.
grade, yeah.
And, it just, there's an experience in taking the test over and over and over too, right?
Absolutely.
Especially as you send to WA and so.
Even just the stamina, right?
All that, yeah,
100%,
yeah.
yeah.
And then again,
Absolutely.
the shift from legacy, which are the paper-based tests, to computer, right?
Thanks.
Yeah,
Like that,
kids
yeah.
need to learn how to type, even in 3rd grade.
Some of those accommodation features.
Yeah, yeah. And then grade 5, we have our ELA and our math again. There was a bit of a decrease in our exceeding and our expectations, and a 7% increase in meeting. So it's promising that we're moving kids out of partially meeting into meeting, but then again, we see that increase. So my guess is that I predict that next year those will be higher because we have a evidence-based research comprehension ELA curriculum now at grades 3 to 5. And then math, we have our exceeding expectations is consistent. There was a 6% increase in math and in meeting expectations. I want to give a shout out to Mary O'Gorman, who's retired, because I think this is a result of a lot of that work that, with the teachers coming together with their curriculum meetings, and she was leading that. And then a 6% increase in meeting and 4 in partially meeting. In grade 5, science and technology, this was actually really encouraging. There was a 4% increase in exceeding expectations. Science and technology, we've got to really make room for that in our curriculum. And having a 4% increase, I think, after what we've been through with COVID, and now where they use TCI, our STEM coordinators are always out there in the buildings. I really think it's a tribute to that work. And then we have our grade 4, and then grade 3. We have ELA. There was a 7% decrease in partially meeting and 5% increase in not meeting. And again, you see exceeding expectations was static, it was the same. So it tells me we've got some kids that are moving out of the partially and the not meeting are switching. And perhaps, where's that, 54, 56? No, I think they're coming from the other groups. And then math, grade 4 noticings. Again, math has been a strong suit here across our district. We have 5% increase in exceeding expectations and an 8% decrease in meeting, 5% increase in not meeting. So that makes me wonder what's happening there with a few. But those are the questions, those are the discussions we have with the curriculum coordinators and then therefore with the teachers when they're doing their work. ELA, grade 3, consistent overall. So that's a tribute to the K2 teachers because they have 1 year at grade 3 and boom, they get the MCAS. It's a rude awakening. And then from math at grade 3 too, we had 5% increase, 4% decrease in meeting and exceeding, 4% increase, and a 5% decrease. So it's encouraging that we see some kids moving out of not meeting at math grade 3 into partially and therefore up. So that's also encouraging.
Although it looks like that bump you get in 22 in grade 3 carried to grade 4 this year, right? It's the similar sort of, it's a little bit of an outlier of a bump there, you know, certainly in the math. And you see that in this year's grade 4.
Yeah. And then I think
the part that's kind of interesting with what Chris Chu said is that, you know, when you're looking at the data compared to 2019, there's still, I understand you're looking back and saying like there's increases over last year's data, but I think I'm really sitting here reflecting, you know, today I was at the State House, I had to testify on a bill around kids' mental health in schools. That was what the bill was about. And I'm like looking at this and like we can look at the data about the MCAS, but there's a lot of other stuff going on with kids too. And I know that this isn't the conversation we're having, but this is the experience that I'm having as I look at these numbers. Like when we're looking, because you've been so kind to provide the data back to 2019, and so when you look at that, there's more of a story there, I think.
And I'm glad you did say that though too, because like we do look at the data because it's something that we're supposed to look at, but we are very clear that it is one data point
piece,
because we know that there is so many other things going on, right? And what is this telling us? And it's a part of that conversation as we're looking at the questions to see like, is this about an exam? Is this about the curriculum leading up to it? Is it about what's going on with an individual and or a group of individuals?
Can I clarify? You know, I know obviously when we're looking at this data, it's specifically on the MCAS test. The data group we looked at earlier on in the presentation, was that data also including, you know, it was saying like student absenteeism or, you know.
That is not included in these specific numbers. That's part of the percentage.
Like the student growth, no, it's not.
It's an indicator.
Right.
Absenteeism.
Our overall, when they're looking at our overall accountability.
Like the by school meeting, that one.
Yeah.
The one that was like.
But not like the student growth percentile.
No.
That's all specific to MCAS.
That's how much they learned in 1 year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then this one, go back one more. No. No.
So
never mind. The one that was
Marisol
like
brings
this.
up a good point too. So when I shared this with the principals at leadership, Brian Rourke, who's our PE, Physical Education, Health and Wellness Director, K-12, he also included some panorama data around some of the achievement percentiles and student growth slides. So those are embedded in the notes. But if you look at them, when we did our belonging questions in Panorama, all of our kids are in grades 3 to 10 are within the range of like 51% favorable to 71% favorable of having a sense of belonging. And so that's encouraging, yet there's still work to do. So that's the social emotional side of the data in conjunction to this as well, is we need to look at the whole child because this is one point in time.
The one that I kind of is jumping out a little bit for me and just in general is just the not meeting expectations group, because if you look at, you know, kind of overall and you're looking back comparing it to 2019, and I'm assuming that group is probably a lot of kiddos who have IEPs or have struggled with COVID, and you know, I'm seeing that number kind of jumping up as opposed in general through a number of them, and that's the group I think.
And we're losing ground and exceeding too.
Yeah.
If you're looking at 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's, I mean, I think it's great that we're surveying kids about belonging, but there's other data points as well that, and survey language is important. And we know that suicidality has up, and thoughts of suicidality among youth are up. And so I think that's a really important part of when we're thinking about stressors in kids.
Was there more?
No, the other
I can't
stuff
tell
is
if
it's pretty. It's kind of another way of showing what was already shown. So if you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. Or
Yeah, it's the same data, just.
I guess, I mean, it's so dense, right? What we're all trying to grapple with. But, and you mentioned sort of offhand a couple times. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about what happens with the data, right? Like you said, you were sharing it with the leadership team, the curriculum coordinators dig in. Could you talk a little bit more about what happens next with the data in Westford?
Well, here's a perfect example. I was able to observe a department meeting, and it was led by one of the curriculum coordinators, and what they did is they presented the data similar to how I did, but they get actually more into the nitty-gritty of the question and item analysis. So they look at the released questions, they look at the standards where they're maybe not performing. I think it was, one of them was something about the way they're sequencing and their ideas throughout a paragraph or an essay that they've been concerned about. And so that's where the nitty-gritty of matching what the standard is to the pedagogy and the instruction. So my sense is that that is replicated across all the other curriculum departments with the coordinators. So they do take a deep dive once the MCAS is released, and they do that item analysis cross grade level. So it could be 6 to 8. They do an overview like I did, and then they break into the grade level groups, and they do more of a closer look at the item analysis. And from there, they make decisions about, okay, what do we need to do to streamline our curriculum for the remainder of the year? Do we focus on this skill, this concept? How can we inform our prior grades that this question or this standard is weak at grade 8 and communicate that to grade 7? Well, when you guys teach this, can you really make sure that they got this skill because we're performing weak on this skill? And so being able to be part of those meetings, that's where you get that connection from the assessment to the classroom.
And another example there was, so when we talk about trying to figure out what we can remove from the plate,
Yes.
the math teachers, I know Joe Barnes was leading the
Yes.
math teachers over the summer and looking at previous data like this and looking at the standards and saying, okay, historically we do really well with this standard all the time, but it seems like we're probably spending more time on it than we need to.
Exactly.
Because it was something that they did well in 7th grade and 6th grade, so let's remove this unit, or let's not spend as much time here so that we can do something else that we want to do, and allowing that data to kind of show them, okay, and they are talking about the standards as opposed to people get concerned about teaching to the test. Well, they're not teaching to the test. They're literally just focusing on what the standards are and how those standards are connected in all of their units already, and then identifying those discrete standards that they think maybe the majority of students seem to be struggling with this, whereas even with some individuals, they can be like, okay, these individuals are just struggling with this one thing. So that's kind of the way it breaks down into actual practice.
A question on the individuals, because I see how, bearing in mind this test happens in the spring, you don't get the data till October. So by the time you get the data as a teacher, that class is gone. And so you're really only using that information, like you're saying,
That's right.
to inform your practice for this year for an entire class. But when we're looking at the individuals who are not meeting expectations, is there a practice in terms of specifically trying to follow them so that we're not getting a bigger gap along the way? Because obviously they've gone up into another grade, a whole other, team. And so, what happens on that individual kind of data point for individuals with that?
I think that's the power of the multi-tiered systems of support, is that it's built to make sure kids aren't failing, and so then we're charged to strengthen our tier 1 for the standards that we're showing that are a challenge for us, but then we also have to target in tier 2 and 3 what interventions or supports are those kids specifically getting. And so that goes back down to the curriculum coordinator level, and then the teacher teams. So it is a combination of special education, even English language learners may be in that mix as well. So I think it is the last grade level that they can globally look at the standards to increase the improvement of the instruction of those standards. But that data does follow to the next level, and those teachers do get a sense of, okay, this is the whole child. Okay, do they need tier 1 or tier 2 intervention or tier 3? And so I think it is a cascading effect of those mechanisms and those structures and practices that our teachers are strong at.
Just to that question and to your response, and if you said this, I apologize.
That's okay.
But when we look at like MTSS, is MCAS data used as an indicator, or is it other assessments that we're using in the curriculum?
MCAS is definitely one of the points, but we also look at our own internal assessments.
Sure.
So iReady at the lower grades, IXL at the middle school, teacher formatives or rubrics more in class.
Dibbles used?
Yeah, Lexia, Dibbles we've used in the past. So yes, there is, we don't want to judge a kid on one test.
No, absolutely.
And so, and so the teachers are very versed in saying, like, if they go to an IST, they are bringing in all of these pieces. I know last year there was a question about what data and who should be at ISTs. And so we had Panorama, we had iReady My Path work, and the I should say the diagnostics for iReady. And so we called those data points out to remind people that they should be using that at an IST to get a more global view of the student's strengths. So yeah, we don't just rely on this.
Is there a pretty good correlation between individual MCAS data and the other assessment tools that we're using?
Well, yeah, or the reverse. So iReady actually will predict how kids will do on MCAS. So I think on that side, we value that predictive nature of our assessments to say how we expect them to do. So when we get to MCAS, there shouldn't be any surprises. Like, we should know and have an idea. Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm wondering is it worth having a conversation with Gerard at some point is we never see any of this kind of data, in my experience anyway, in our IEPs. And we get a lot of, narratives. Now, I know also the IEP form is about to change.
Yes.
So this idea or statement might be maybe outdated by next September. But I'm wondering, is there a place for having some of this data kind of reported within the IEPs as another form, just another tool of kind of just, I suppose,
Sometimes it's
managing
in the
progress.
narrative.
I was gonna say,
Sometimes
it
it's
is
in the
included,
narrative.
especially if there are accommodations that are being developed, there's very specific language that MCAS requires there to be in an IEP.
Right. There's a
Well, from a
page-
younger-
There's a page for accommodations
Yeah.
where they specifically say whether or not they should include those accommodations, so there's a page for that. And in the narrative, sometimes they include information about this.
I think and sometimes it's also, I think depending on when the meeting is, how relevant is the most
Yes.
recent MCAS data, right? Because it could be from last year and it's not really impactful yet, depending on what time the meeting
But
is.
even adding in
it's
like
a
the
good question.
dibbles or the iReady,
Yes.
they're just other ways of marking progress,
And so in my work last year with some of those schools, we did put that in the IST process, is that they should be looking at dibbles, Lexia, even bridges, which is part of the math intervention curriculum at the lower grades. And so, yes, calling attention to those data points is very important. I know in speaking to my colleagues with the comprehension, the new curriculum, EL, and the way that we write goals is going to be changing, because we need to think about literacy comprehension strategies, and then what do we need to get the kids to be literate. So there's going to be some work going on between ELA, or I should say Humanities, and Gerard to talk about how do we write those new literacy goals under the umbrella of comprehension.
I had one more question, which was, like you were saying, when you it sounds like when you log in, you could almost spend the whole day in the data.
Oh, yes.
And I understand all the nuances and all the different ways to look at it. I still yearn for, though, like a headline, right? Like, what if you zoomed out 10,000 feet? What does all of this data? What is your takeaway, or do you feel like it's just too complicated that?
Oh, no. I mean, my takeaway is that we have a strong school system here. We do have a good tier 1 where we see kids making at least a year's growth in that sense. I like the way you said that, a headline. I'll think of that next time. And then it tells us areas of need. So the work that I've done with the ESL department is one of those areas of need. So how do we get our multilingual learners to become more proficient in English language, and prepare them for the MCAS, and then again prepare them for, Access and then MCAS. So it also helps us to, like what Dr. Chu said, what are we doing well in that we are spending a lot of airtime in our classrooms on when we don't need to? And so letting people know what domains that we're strong in. Is it operations and algebraic thinking? Is it, geometry? I know math really well. And then where do we say we're going to go fast here because we just need to review, but we're going to go slower with these concepts because, first of all, knowing the percentages of like the number of questions per domain is really important for pacing and scope and sequence. So at the lower levels, the operations and algebraic thinking grades 4 and 5, huge. It's a big real estate on MCAS. So our scope and sequence should be emphasizing a good part of our schooling in that area. Geometry at the lower levels, not a lot of real estate on MCAS, but it's there that we should be teaching it, but how much time do we devote to that at the lower levels when we know that number-based 10, counting, and algebra are the biggest real estate? So that's another way that we use
Like
this.
a feedback loop.
Yeah, and like where do we put our most weight and our most time and our pacing?
Thank you. Any last questions for Magali? No. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
We're very optimistic on an H20.
Sure.
Do you want
Thanks,
Jenny to
guys.
come up to the microphone for the budget timeline, or are you going to speak?
So you
to that?
guys,
Sure, she can, but we can. I mean,
Yeah.
if she wanted to.
Well, she put the
She
memo
did.
together.
Do you want me to share?
Thank you,
anything?
Alex.
So much.
I don't think so. Thanks, guys.
Night, guys.
Night, guys.
See you next
Um,
time.
Jenny, did you want to join us as we just talk about the timeline or whatnot? I know we're not expecting you to present anything, so I'm not throwing that at you.
So do you mind just sit here if you have any questions?
Okay. All right,
Okay.
thank you. So the next order of business is sort of,
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
can I get, a follow-up discussion on the budget task force report and presentation and all of the lovely information that was embedded in the beautiful 100-page report.
Beautiful, perfect.
Which again, you
I
did
have
an
some edits.
excellent
I
job.
have some edits on it. I have
Yeah,
some,
yeah,
I have-
some-
Can we just go
some
through them line by
typos,
line,
some
line by
typos,
line?
I feel like we
Suggestions?
need to print it out and like get
Print
it
line.
bound, like leather bound with gold
Yeah.
embossed
No.
for you.
No, but, you know, I think we had a couple members present at that meeting. I hope you have all had time to peruse it, on your own time.
I pursued perusing it.
I again, am available for any questions or digesting it. But, you know, it really will be a major factor in our FY25 budget process, which is already
Already in
going.
process.
So there have been, I would say, frequent communications between joint chairs, so select board chair, finance committee chair, and then Dr. Chu and Kristen and vice chairs, and Jenny and Dan O'Donnell from town. And so we're just trying to really coordinate both town and schools as we sort of head up this budget process, because it will be different than previous years. One thing that the select board recently had their discussion about at their meeting last week was how to direct the town manager and the town department heads to create an FY25 budget. Because really the recap of the report is that the expenses are more than we can afford with our typical Prop 2.5 increase in revenue. So to accommodate those increases would be, the other side of that scale would be a drastic amount of reductions. So one thing that the select board directed this town manager to do is to create two budgets. So one budget that would live within what our historical increase would be, which would be ugly, which would be more reductions than we have seen in years, and a drastic difference in service level. And another budget that would have would rely on some amount of additional revenue through an override that the town meeting would have to approve and at the ballot in May.
Remind us, what's the gap for FY25? Or
We just
So
reported this.
we did just record
Yeah,
it,
I
however,
can't remember.
what's in the report is, it's including everything together, so it's hard to say specifically at this moment in time. We will tell you when we do the budget presentations exactly what those two different numbers are.
It's like, I mean, the report is using the numbers like $6 to $8 million.
Yeah. But that's
Oh,
for the
yeah,
whole,
yeah.
that's for the whole town.
All of the increases
Yeah.
for all the towns,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Is that what your question
No,
was?
that was for
I'm
town,
sorry.
yeah.
I thought you were talking about like for us
No,
specifically.
no.
So, sorry, I just lost my train of thought now. Yes, so this is our chance to sort of, we would be giving that similar direction unless there's a discussion to be had about a different direction, to Jenny and to Dr. Chu to approach that similarly as the town departments are. Have I made that clear as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like saying like there should be two budgets, one predicting one future and one predicting a different
Right.
future.
And I think it's also important to talk about that the second budget with some amount of additional revenue would not be the bells and the whistles, right?
No,
We would
it's still-
follow our normal budgeting process of looking at what are the needs and still
What are the
making.
efficiencies that we can make? What are the,
Right,
what are?
still
what are-
making those
yeah.
enrollment-based projections, like, you know.
Like
the-
a responsible budget.
Not
Exactly.
profligate
Yes.
spending.
It's not
Yeah.
a wish list.
Yeah.
So it occurs to me that the devil is often in the small details on our budgets, where we see tiny changes have big impacts, right? And so when I hear things like 8 to 10 million, I'm like, that's a huge range. And when I hear things like the town is going to do 2 budgets, and so we'll have a similar thing, the thought that comes to my mind is, how do we know, what the allocation is?
Right.
There have we talked about a process with the town side to say, let's say we have a marker that says we're going to do a budget that has this total number, bottom line, for the town, and we're going to do a second one that has this. Is there talk about a process that says, okay, how do we distribute that difference, those cuts? Because it probably, you could just say, we're going to do it very equally, it's a percentage, a flat percentage, but I think all that we've learned from the past few months is
Yeah.
sometimes we have to go another level down and say that's not necessarily the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So, if I kind of jump in,
Please.
because I do think that those are the conversations that have been taking place for a long time, right? Since the last budget cycle, we've been talking about FY25. And so tomorrow, Jenny and I are meeting with Kristen and Dan to review based on typical growth within the levy limit, within the 2.5, Proposition 2.5, what the potential allocation could be for the schools. They already know what our needs are because we've been talking about that throughout this whole process. So they know the things that we're looking at. So they also know that we're building 2 budgets as well. So they know that we can't begin to build that second budget, which is the one that lives within the allocation, until we know what their projected allocation is, which is sort of speaking to what you're saying, Chris. And so we're going to talk about that tomorrow. But my approach in thinking of this whole thing was, I do believe that what we've done for the past 2 years has been a very successful budget process where we have come in with what we have as identified needs. We've identified our enrollment changes. We've identified adjustments based on that. And then we've come very close in the first place to what the town was able to allocate. And we've had a conversation with our town partners to figure out how can we get to where we need to get to. So I'm anticipating approaching our needs budget in the same way, just knowing that because of all of the circumstances, because of all of the costs, it's going to be a significant percentage increase. Meeting the 2.5, Proposition 2.5, that's going to be very drastic and require significant reductions and cuts. So those are going to be the 2 scenarios that I think we're going to see. So again, I want to make it clear to people that when we talk about 2, one is not just wishful thinking, sky's the limit,
Right.
shopping scenario. That's not what we're doing at all. But we are going to have 2 different budgets, and so that'll make this process a little bit different, because at the end, typically you vote to approve a recommendation, and we didn't really talk, I don't know if the select board talked through that, but you do that before they do, right? So you do that and send that on to the FinCom. So I believe you're probably going to need to do 2.
Right.
And so we'll have to have conversations about both of them. And what we might find is it might be easier for our brains to truly talk about them separately, and so that we're not mixing them up. That's something that I'm thinking about as we go into this. Like, if we want to talk about the timeline, I don't know if we want to talk about that yet, but
Do we have to approve the 2 budgets like pre-March in one sense? Because could we approve the bigger, the aspirational budget and kind of take that we are coming to,
Recommending that.
this is our recommendation, we are seeking, it's something we vote on in essentially a way of, this is us asking the town, our recommendation is we are asking you to pass what is an override. And that this is our ask, and that if it fails, do we then vote on what was the other budget?
I don't know the answer to that.
I'm
Because
trying-
I do know
Yeah,
there'll be
I think
2
we're all
things,
kind
so
of
we have to
learning
figure
that,
out
but-
procedurally
Yeah,
and that might be something that we might be able to explore a little bit this weekend when we're talking with a bunch of other school committee
Right.
folk.
Yes.
And superintendents might have gone through this process.
Yeah.
And or looking at our policies as well too, because that's a good question. I know
Right.
we need to talk about the two different ones, but whether or not you procedurally, because you probably can't. You probably, because I don't know
I feel
what
like
the
I've
charge
seen-
is.
I
If
feel like
you're
I've
supposed
seen
to
votes.
approve,
I feel like I've seen votes that are dependent,
okay.
like
Yeah.
We'll find out.
the school committee approves this if this, but this if not, or something. But certainly that's an open question, we can look into that. In your packet is a budget timeline that Jenny put together, so that basically you can see that both of our December meetings will be pretty budget heavy. And then we expect to follow, might be interesting to note too, the date that the town manager will present the town budget to the select board is December 12th, those two budgets. So that might be interested to tune in to listen to that. And then we expect to follow the usual process of budget hearings through January and February. And we're talking to finance committee chair to make sure that process
Right.
is, two sets of questions and trying to figure out sort of all of that, but
The challenge for us is that if
one of
if indeed it becomes a question of an override, that would go to the voters on March 23rd. If at town meeting an override is approved, it has to go on the ballot, which is May 7th. So that means if that's the direction that we're going in, we would not actually know until May 7th as to what, right? So that's just a whole different
Right.
experience for us. And back to the timeline piece, my goal is to present, last year I presented the recommendation of the budget, the first real presentation, the week before the town manager presented. So I did that it was December 5th last year, so I'm still anticipating doing that on December 4th. Whether it's both budgets or whether it's one budget on the 4th and one budget on the 18th, we can actually talk about that a little bit more as to see like what's,
Yep.
based on the work that Jenny and I are doing, what makes the most sense. I'm inclined to just know that the conversations are gonna go over multiple meetings anyway.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Just looking at the timeline here, we're not going to do a budget hearing and a vote on the same night, are we?
no, those are,
Okay.
It's just covering.
Just
I think-
covering
I
across
assume
those
she just put
dates.
in what
Okay.
our available meeting dates are.
Okay.
And, a couple years ago, that we have added meetings before too, so.
wait, which one, I'm sorry, which one were you looking
You
at?
see the December 18th, January
Yep.
2nd, the budget hearing plus school committee vote.
So we're saying that it would be
Across
within
those-
across
those,
those.
yeah.
Those, yes.
Okay.
Because that was actually something that we actually adjusted,
Yeah.
was when the actual hearing took place.
Right, and then I guess I'm just adding the disclaimer that we can always adjust and
Yeah.
Right.
add an off Monday meeting or something like
Yeah.
that, yeah. I had one more point I was gonna raise. Another interesting thought for that, to fill you in on something else that came up at, in the joint budget meeting or the joint chairs, is that, if there is, when, I guess, there is more talk about the specifics of an override, one idea that has been brought up is this idea that some other municipalities have had a memorandum of understanding between town departments and school departments about what those future allocations would be based on a successful override. And I know that has certainly been an area of interest before, so I think that's important to talk about at the outset.
In my initial impression is that I think that that's something that both the select board and the school committee would be open to discussing and
Yes.
interested in looking at, because I think that has been successful for the communities that we talk to, that we're able to do that, because then it helps everybody
Yeah,
prepare for the future,
right,
right?
right.
And we do have a policy on 5-year budgeting that I came across the other day.
I also I think none of you will be surprised, but I also just want to say Jenny is already doing an incredible job just crunching all of these
Yay.
numbers. And she literally it's hours upon hours upon hours upon hours of making sure that every single person is accurately reflected and rolled over. There's no, it's not like estimating and, you know, I mean, it's, everything is accounted for.
I'm
It's
just so glad you were
painstaking
with
work.
us last year. Can you imagine if this had been Jenny's first year coming in? So
I think she's probably feeling that way too, or maybe thinking.
Maybe
"That was
last
fun
year felt like
year."
that. I mean,
And related to that point is that we're about to ask our
Yeah.
Director of School Finance to do double the work
Yes.
for this year. So thank you, Jenny.
Yep.
And
That's a
we're
great point,
appreciative
Sean.
of
That's a great
what we're about to ask you to do. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sean.
Well said. Thank you.
It's challenging to prepare two budgets, but it's easier process than last year, I'm
Good.
pretty sure. And
Good.
because that's my second year,
Yeah.
you know, feeling like everything is, you know, making sense.
Yeah.
Better sense now this year.
Good.
It's going to be difficult for the second budget.
Great.
Well, if there was anything you
Thank you.
didn't
Yeah.
understand last year, we didn't know.
And one final, or, sorry, do you have a question?
I was just going to ask with the finance subcommittee, is there engagement in the process to try and help with the conversation, or
So
when can those conversations start? Because I think I see you guys as being pretty critical to the whole thing.
My hope is that if we have an opportunity before December 4th to share what we're thinking of presenting, so that then I think the subcommittee can then kind of ask us some questions there that might help frame before we then bring it to the full committee. I
Yeah.
feel like that's what we did last year,
Yeah, it
which I
worked
think was
well.
really helpful. Not really expecting the subcommittee to get into the weeds with it as much as give us a, you know, in some ways a run through to see if there are things that we might not be thinking about, you know, yeah. Critical thought partners.
Yeah. Two last thoughts I just want to make sure we talk about or have said is that this will be different than previous years because the drastic budget will talk about personnel, right? Because
Right.
salaries are such a big part of our budget, and I feel like we just want to make sure that we bring our staff along with that understanding of that there is two budgets and how to understand the logistics of it. And then the last thought I wanted to share was that usually override does have a ballot action committee. So if you know of anyone who might be interested in taking on an extra volunteer role, those efforts are usually led by engaged members in the community. And so, you know, just be thinking about if you know somebody who might be interested. Any other thoughts there? No questions? Okay. All right. So there was a personnel update in the packet. Nothing.
It's less of a personnel update, which is
Yeah,
nice
smaller
that,
and smaller.
as we're now in November,
Yep.
that it's not as many positions, but I think you'll see, we have had a couple of new ESP positions that some have been based on student needs, and some of those are filling vacancies that we already had. So that's all.
Great. Thank you. And a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?